Morton.
Oh, Morton, of course.
So my question is,
Hey.
how do you deal with things in scriptures that seem incomprehensible? For example, Krishna told the Gita to the sun god. But how do you deal with things where wrong places?
How do you deal with concepts that seem incomprehensible? Do you mean like things that seem like they could only fall within the realm of mythology? Is that what you mean? Yeah, I've thought a lot about this. It's a good question. Especially I've thought about it in terms of Krishna's Leelas, right? Because we hear that these Vedic scriptures is a vast body of literature, culminates in the text called the Srimad Bhagavatam, which itself culminates in the telling of Krishna's pastimes. And in those pastimes, you hear so many things that seem like mythology. Commonly, it will be categorized as mythology, amongst scholars or others. And obviously, in our experience, we don't experience, at least most of us, don't experience a lot of things that these books talk about. We hear that Krishna, as an 8-year-old boy, lifts a mountain on his finger. That must be a story, just like children's stories, like other kinds of fantasy and so on. One would think, even people that would read these texts and say, some people would read these texts and just write them off as just entirely silly. Some people would say it's mythology, but there's a lot to learn from it. It's got a lot of interesting messages. I don't see it like that. I see it as something much more. So as I engage with the literature over the course of many years, I've been practicing bhakti and reading these texts for about nearly 40 years. And so they've opened up to me, and I've opened up to them. In ways now where I encounter things like that, the way that I process them, I can process them with a type of faith that to me is very rational. Is it rational to accept that an 8-year-old boy can lift a mountain on his little finger? I would assume most people would say no, but I have no problem saying yes, for different reasons. I'll give you one type of logic or one way that I process it, and then I'll give you another. One is more exoteric and one is more esoteric. Okay? So the more exoteric one is, let's just get practical. Let's get real. What is the realm of our experience? The realm of our experience is quite tiny. Who are we to say that things can't happen that are way beyond what we experience within our small realm? Right? Now there's a hesitation in people. There's a kind of skepticism that someone says, no, what I'm experiencing is pretty much what goes on, and don't tell me any wild stories. People can just make up these stories, and that's all they are, they're stories. But even now we can see that there are all kind of far out things that have been here all along that we never knew about, and that sounded like fantasy before. And to me, perhaps the most, well, at least one very strong indicator or example of this would be, take the iPhone. Okay, so if you take an iPhone and say you could hold an iPhone in your hand and you could go back 300 years. Now, if you bumped into someone and they might ask you, what is that piece of glass that you have in your hand? And you could say, this piece of glass allows me to look into it. I can look into it. I can see another person inside it who may be situated thousands of miles away. And I can talk with them. Now, that idea, if you mentioned that to someone 300 years ago, 200 years ago, even 100 years ago, they would say that you're being silly now. This is fantasy. Now, we've heard about this kind of thing like in Alice in Wonderland, right, where there's a looking glass, and you can look into the glass and see someone that's somewhere else and talk with them. But that's fantasy. That's for children. That could never happen. There's no way that that can happen. But now we see that it can happen. That not only can it happen, everybody's walking around with one in their pocket, right? How does it work? What if someone asks you, how does it work? You would say, well, there are these waves that are going through the air. Oh, there's waves. Really? Okay. More fantasy, right? Oh, why can't we see the waves? Well, they're invisible. Oh, they're invisible, are they? Okay. Right. Okay. Invisible waves. And they're carrying pictures from one part of the world to the other side of the earth. And how long does it take for it to arrive? Oh, it's like practically instant. Oh, it's instant. Yeah. The waves, they go up into outer space, and there's a station floating around up there, and it catches it, and then it sends it back down. Oh, really? No, it's just floating up in there. How did it get up there? Well, we kind of sent it up. Oh, you sent it up there, and it's floating around. It doesn't come down. Doesn't come down, huh? No, it doesn't come down. It all sounds like fantasy. It just took someone to know how to do it. Eventually, a certain type of knowledge progressed and progressed and progressed until people figured out that there are waves going through the air, and there are ways that it can carry pictures and sound and video and all kinds of information. And even right now, if we just took this area right under this little tent and we examined it, we'd find that every drop of information, every little megabyte, or what's smaller than a megabyte? Is that it? I don't know. Huh? A byte. Every byte. Every byte on YouTube is right here in our atmosphere, right? And it's accessible if you have the technology to access it, right? And so there's a very, in my opinion, that's a very clear example of how something that would previously, not very long ago, would sound like just as fantastic, just as much fantasy, story, fairy tale, as anything else that we read in Srimad Bhagavatam or these texts. Isn't that just as much? That you can look into a piece of glass and talk to someone thousands of miles away, and yet it can be done. So that was lying outside of the field of our experience. And our senses didn't have access to that kind of thing. And in our mind, we would limit our mind and say that that's fantasy. That does not fall into the realm of science. That does not fall into the realm of reality. But it does. So how far does it go? How far are these things possible? Now, I have a lot of faith in these texts for many reasons. You could say that they're fairy tales. One could say that. But you're at very least, if you're objective, if you're truly objective, you have to admit that this is a very unique body of literature, right? The entire Vedic literature composed by Vyasa is at least, I mean, there's different ways to count it, but like what we have here on Earth, because they do say that it's larger in other realms, but here on Earth, we can read about 520,000 Sanskrit verses. If you count the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Vedanta Sutra, the Mahabharata, and all the Puranas. About something like 520,000 verses, poetry. Some of it is like incredibly beautiful poetry. Some of it is the most captivating storytelling you're ever going to find. You read Mahabharata, there's a story that has been handed down, it hasn't run its course, right? To this day, people are captivated by it, fascinated by it. In India, when it came out, I think it was back in, it might have been I think it was in the 90s that it came out as like a television series. 80s, maybe the 80s. Doordarshan, that's right. Yeah, you see? When that show came out in India, the whole country practically shut down and everybody was watching because it's such powerful storytelling. Not only is it powerful captivating storytelling, but it's weaved into it, threaded through it, is absolutely fascinating philosophy, deep philosophy. the kind of deep philosophy that scholars write long texts and theses about. I mean, it's very serious stuff. As dense and as thoughtful as any Western philosophy out there, there's Greek philosophy or anything out there. So unique books, very beautiful poetry, very dense philosophy, incredible social commentary. Then it has an entire medical tradition that grows out of it, Ayurveda. It's got an entire kind of like architectural wing that grows out of it, in the Silpa Shastras. It's got all different types it's got music that grows out of it, whole musical science. It's got an entire dramatical science that grows out of it. It's got an entire astrological or an astronomical, wing that grows out of it. Practically, like all the sciences grow out of it. The language itself, Sanskrit, is even today, at NASA, they'll say that this is the most perfect language. This is the language that we need for our computers. This is a flawless language. Whoever created this language was incredibly brilliant. It's brilliant from a computer level. It's also brilliant from a artistic level, because the way that the grammar is designed is it gives incredible freedom to compose poetry. The grammar allows you to do many things that other languages limit you. It expands your capacity to express yourself artistically. Also in the vocabulary, very deep, very sophisticated vocabulary, where just like one concept like love will have many, 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 many words to express the many nuances, where other languages will be more limiting, or it would take several sentences to express what Sanskrit can express in one word. So whoever wrote these texts somehow came up with this incredibly brilliant language too, right? Mathematics, a lot of the fundamental discoveries in mathematics grew out of the Vedic texts, and those that were studying them. So these were not primitive people. You can come, and people have come. Different invaders have come and looked at their cultures backwards. It's not at all backwards. It's actually incredibly, incredibly sophisticated, incredibly brilliant, incredibly beautiful, incredibly artistic, incredibly knowledgeable. And they're putting out these texts that have stood the test of time. Now, the Upanishads, which are essentially philosophical texts, speak about other levels of reality. Like they speak about time in the way that nobody had spoken about time before, really since. And then you have scientists, in the 20th century going into the atom and developing quantum physics and saying, this is very strange, that the laws of physics that we thought were everything, they're being broken inside the atom. And the only place that they can find anything that resembles what they're discovering is in the Upanishads. Right? So Einstein said something. I've shared this a few nights out here. Some of you may have heard it before, but it's so relevant to your question. Einstein said that imagination is more important than knowledge. Right? Imagination is more important than knowledge. Now that statement doesn't sound like something you'd hear from a scientist. Generally, you say imagination, that's something that children engage in. They play around in their imagination. But scientists are interested in knowledge. What we can prove is true. But Einstein said imagination is more important than knowledge, because if you don't have imagination, you never discover the mysteries. You get stuck. Our equipment, our telescopes, our microscopes, they'll take us to a certain edge, and then we're stuck. And unless there's a thinker that's thinking more creatively, that has a greater imagination to understand what could be beyond, then you never go beyond. Right? And so we have to have an imagination that stretches beyond our empiric reach if we're going to discover deeper truths. And that's how I apply my thinking to these texts, that they're not impossible. Right? That if I can look into a looking glass and see someone on the other side of the earth, then yes, perhaps there is a way that Krishna could lift a hill. Perhaps there's a way that he could operate beyond the laws of physics as we understand them. Perhaps a mountain could weigh less than the air, and he could lift it up like it's nothing, right? Or perhaps a boy could be the source of the entire creation, you know. Now that was, I was saying that was like the more exoteric way that I approach it, but it's the esoteric side that is, to me, more important even. And that is, someone could look at all of Krishna's leelas and say, well, what's going on here? Why are we here? Why would he lift the mountain? What would be the point of that? It seems like the stuff of children's stories. So if this figure is God, if this is the divine being who is the source of the cosmos and beyond the laws of material energy, why would that apparently very sophisticated and powerful being be interested in playing around in something that sounds like children's stories? And that can actually be understood through the Vedic, Sanskrit teachings or science of drama. And even today, if you go and you read a book about like how to write a screenplay, generally what they tell you to do is you need your protagonist, your lead character, and then you need to feel some affection for the lead character. So generally within the first, even sometimes they're even advised to, like, within the first minute of your film, your protagonist, even if the protagonist is like a criminal or something, they have to do one thing, even if it's a small thing that just sends a little message to the viewer. There's something good about them. There's something I like about them. You know, just a little sympathy. And then what you do is you give the protagonist problems. And then you give them more problems. And then you know what you do after that? Give them more problems. Okay? You have to give them problems upon problems upon problems. You have to give them some very difficult, complicated network of problems that they need to somehow overcome. And it's in their overcoming those problems that we reach the conclusion where we feel a sense of catharsis ourselves. But along the way, what's happening is that because of all the problems, what it's doing is heightening the emotions, right? Because there's such struggle for the protagonist, you begin to feel deeper emotions for them. If everything was going very smooth, there'd be no churning of the emotions. But because they find themselves in such difficult circumstances, we begin to feel emotion for them. Our heart is beating for them. We're sometimes crying tears for them, like that, right? That's how drama works, right? And so a screenplay writer or a drama, someone composing a drama, they can convey emotions. They can they can stimulate emotions within the audience. Now, when we speak about Krishna, we hear that this one form of a beautiful boy is the origin of everything. And he's not interested in the things that, when we think of, you see, we get a very nuanced and sophisticated theology in these texts. He's not interested in judging. That's not our sins and what we've done right and what we've done wrong and the punishment that we're all due. He's really got absolutely no interest in that. He outsources that to others, like Yamaraj, right? He's not interested really in cycles of creation and destruction and all that, He also outsources that, to the guna avatars, Shiva, Vishnu, Brahma. He's willing to be with us at every moment as we move through this world, but even he expands himself to do that in the form of Vishnu, Paramatma, God within the heart of every living being. But while all of this stuff is going on in the material realm, he's busy in the spiritual realm. And what is he busy doing? What is his interest there? Love. Adventures of love. And nothing else. Right? Nothing else. And so just like in a perfect drama, where love gets stimulated by the circumstances, sometimes by the very trying circumstances, the very dramatic circumstances, Krishna is operating in a very dramatic realm. wherein the intensity of what's going on is stirring the heart of everybody that becomes involved in his Leela. So it's intensifying the emotions. It's intensifying the love. So that's why there's a super destructive storm being sent by the god of the rain, and Krishna lifts a mountain and invites all of those he loves underneath the mountain. It's stirring up the emotions. That's why one day Krishna's sitting with his friends, and they're all having lunch together, right? They go out with the cows every day, right? The calves. And in a beautiful pastoral setting. And they sit down by the bank of the Yamuna River, and they all have different food that they share with each other. They pack it to run out for the day, and they break it all out, and now they're all going to eat together, and everybody's in bliss. Being in that perfect setting with Krishna, who they love so much, and each other, who they all love so much. The cows they all love so much. And then they notice that something's wrong. They see the birds dropping from the sky. They sense like a horrible toxic kind of aroma coming out of the river. And everybody's wondering what's going on. Krishna's saying, don't worry, I'll take care of this. He climbs up the nearest tree, he tightens his belt, he jumps into the water. And then when he gets into the water, he starts to slap his hands on top of the water. And in doing so, he's creating like a dramatic type of music. And then from underneath the water comes this serpent, a huge serpent, but it has many heads, and it's terrifying. And very quickly, it gets a hold of Krishna. It has Krishna all wrapped up. Okay? He's been given trouble, right? Now his friends are watching this on the bank of the river. And that friend who they love so dearly is now wrapped up within the coils of this absolutely terrifying water snake. And some of them go running to call the other villagers, to call their parents and the elders and everybody else. Everybody's coming and running, seeing what's going on. And when they get there, they see the love of their life, Krishna, wrapped up in this incredibly dangerous circumstance. And just as they're on the brink of completely losing it, Krishna somehow slips out of the coils of that snake. And in an instant, he's on top of the snake with his feet on its heads. And then he starts to dance, right? He does this dance. You've ever seen like Indian classical dance, like Bharatanatyam or Odissi? You know, you got the big bells on your... Krishna wears bells on his ankles all the time, you know? So he's going like... He's doing this whole thing. And he's doing this beautiful dance. A moment ago, everybody was watching, and they were terrified. And now suddenly, they're just struck with wonder. Now they're struck with the beauty. Now they see Krishna's in control. Now Krishna's effortlessly doing this dance, and every time his foot comes down on the head of that snake, the snake is like, whoa. And then he comes out with his other foot. He's just dancing artistically, but the snake can't handle it. And it's going down, 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 down. And the snake is weakening and weakening and weakening. Now what's happening on the bank of the river? There's different people that fall into different categories that love Krishna in different varieties of love. And watching this, their hearts are being churned, and the love that they feel is being intensified in different varieties. So like the boys who are his friends, when they see Krishna, they don't think of Krishna as God. None of these people do. They just think of Krishna as that village boy who they love so dearly. When his friends see him dancing on top of that snake and now winning, the love that they have in the heart is something like, how to express it? It's like, that's our friend, that's our boy, right? You know, it's almost like a loving pride that they have. Just see Krishna, just see what he's doing again. And his parents, they're going through, all the elders, because all the elders love him with the love that a parent has. And they're all like, oh no, what? They have, the parent has another kind of love that's like always a little concerned, but still like when a parent sees a child do something, when they see their own child do something wonderful, How many parents do we have here? Parents? Any parents? Parents? Are you parents? Do you speak English? Yes. Are you a parent? No children. No children. Okay. No, not one parent here.
Wow.
Okay. Well, from what I understand, when a parent sees their child do something wonderful and amazing, there's a feeling of wonder and of pride and of love, a unique flavor of love that rises in the heart of the parent when they see that. And what to speak when they saw this? They're being flooded. They're drowning in an ocean of love in beautiful varieties, and unique varieties of love. And the girls, every one of those girls loves Krishna with that kind of young love that only a young girl can have, right? And when they see him doing this, it's like this boy can do everything. It's like sometimes we're trying not to fall in love with him because we're young girls. We're not supposed to fall in love with the young boys until we're married. But what can they do? They're helpless. No matter how hard they try to forget him, no matter how hard they try not to fall in love with him, he's conquering their hearts and drowning them in romantic love and again in these unique flavors. That's why Krishna has all of this kind of lila on the esoteric side, because it's his way of churning and churning and churning the deepest feelings of love that we can't even imagine in our worldly, earthly experience. So if we look at it from that perspective, whether it's true or not, it's a very interesting theology, and it makes a whole lot of sense, right? And it fits together with everything else that you're reading. It even fits together with the astrological stuff. It fits together with the medicinal stuff. It fits together with the architectural stuff. This entire body of knowledge is all snapping into place, because everything that you're reading about there is playing out in the school of drama that it's presenting, and you can understand it from that perspective. So this is not child's play. This is not the work of some primitive culture that has some silly stories that maybe they tell some good lessons through. This is the most sophisticated and well-developed theology that's out there, and it's backed up by its own sciences as well. So when I read Krishna's Leelas like that, I don't see them as just stories. I see them as the richest literature that exists, full of all kinds, all different fields of knowledge, including yogic knowledge, how we can evolve by overcoming all of the crazy programming that we have in our minds. And the most powerful way is by meditating on these pastimes themselves. And when one meditates on them, understands them, feels them, then it's said that one can enter into them into eternity, beyond the realm of time. Right? So when I read the descriptions of these, I'm not reading them from like a child's book author, and I'm not hearing them from some guy with like a aluminum cone on his head. I'm hearing it from the deepest theologians and philosophers. You read their texts. Any objective philosopher will say these are serious philosophers. Whether you believe what they're saying or not, they're very serious. These are powerful thinkers, powerful, very sophisticated thinkers that are buying into this idea. They weren't children. They weren't childish. They were. You can't find deeper thinkers. Sanatana Goswami, Rupa Goswami. These are like the acharyas, the great teachers in our lineage. Sanatana Goswami and Rupa Goswami were brothers that were practically running the government of Bengal, right? Or in Orissa, like today would be like the area of Bengal and Orissa. They were incredibly powerful. They were incredibly entrusted. They were incredibly brilliant. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had those roles. They walked away from it all, gave up the wealth, gave up the fame, gave up the power and the influence, went to the forest of Vrindavan where Krishna had his pastimes, meditated deeply on these pastimes, and wrote incredible, sophisticated explanations of them. You know, it's only for someone to dismiss them as being childish or silly. Whether they believe them or not, that's another thing. But to dismiss them as if they're childish or silly, it only reveals their own ignorance. Because any objective person that is engaged with this literature seriously has to at least admit this is a very sophisticated, nuanced, well-developed philosophy and theology, and there's no doubt about it. Okay? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Your name again?
Aniket.
Aniket.
So it's been well documented that UFOs exist. There is
Okay.
life, and the countless UFO sightings. That knowledge is far, far ahead of ours. So even reading, like for example, Indian mythology from Greek mythology, all the main characters, like 95% of the main characters in the mythology, with the powers they have, and all that was happening in the mythology, it feels like this could be an alien being which has come. Obviously, this alien being, far advanced race, has these powers that came down to Earth to teach humans on how to, live, etc., etc. So, suppose for a moment we consider that, okay, these were aliens. So, they belong to another realm. We cannot strive, for example, to be of the same realm or, be at that same level. So, like, what do we do in the practice? Like, when we know we can't actually, whatever has been taught has come down from another civilization and we can't go there.
It's a very interesting question. I just want to start by sharing one thing in relation to what you just shared. Is that when I first became a monk, which was 1987, it was at the invitation of another monk to travel with him. And in that way, I became a monk myself. And I was growing up in New York City, and he took me out of New York City and took me across the country to San Diego. And in San Diego, there was a temple, and I lived in that temple for some time. Short, a few months or something. But there I met a man who was also a Krishna Bhakta, but he was a PhD in mathematics from Cornell University. So he's a very high-level thinker. And he wrote a book called Alien Identities, right? Alien Identities, wherein he says that all of the stuff that we read about in these ancient texts, people say, well, that's just stories and it's just fairy tales because nobody sees that kind of stuff going on. But what he was writing was actually it's well documented that this stuff is going on all the time. People are reporting seeing it all the time, right? So, we just create this knowledge filter that if something doesn't fit in, we say, oh, we ignore all the kind of. Another clear example of that, not exactly in relation to what you're saying, but there's all kinds of studies that are done about past lives and memories of past lives. There was a scientist named Ian Stevenson who did research, and he took hundreds of cases. And he documented hundreds of cases where children were able to describe other places in the world that they had no access to in very great detail. Like if you have a 3 or 4 year old child that's speaking about, or even younger, that's speaking about a place in another country, a building in another country, and if you go down the steps and into the basement and look behind this, you're going to find that. Now, how would the child know that? There's no way the child could have known that. There are hundreds and hundreds of well-documented studies of this kind of thing happening. But if you don't want to hear it, then you just say it's all nonsense. It's not real science. But they're operating on with the same kind of scientific, what's the word I'm looking for? Standards that in other realms they would welcome that kind of information. So that's there. Now you're saying that if we read these texts, they're telling us that people are existing on higher planets and that they're living lives that are beyond what we're living here.
No, they come from a different realm. So all these mythological characters that we worship, 95% of them, I would say, they come from another realm to planet Earth. And basically, obviously, they have these powers. So, how can we know they come from another realm and we cannot strive to, be in that psychological, that spiritual, because their knowledge is something completely different, which they have tried to impart to us humans, for us to have a better way of living and treating the planet better, etc. So when we know that we cannot reach that certain realm because we come from planet Earth, we have our own limitations. How, like, just this knowledge that is from the aliens, like, what does it make you feel like?
You see, I see it just a little different. That ourselves and the aliens, right, we have access to the same body of knowledge, and that's the Vedas, right? The Vedic literature. They know it, we know it. It's here on Earth. It's been handed down on Earth because an unearthly being like Vyas was able to tap into it and provide it for us. So we all have access to the same body of knowledge. But how we live is different. You see, on the higher planets, they've accrued huge amounts of good karma, and so they're living out the results of that good karma, and they're enjoying life in ways that we can't even imagine. They're more refined in everything they do, and how they associate with one another, and how they spend their time. Their music is more refined. Their cuisine is more refined. Their relationships are more defined. Their romantic affairs are more refined. Their architecture is more refined. Everything's more refined there, and it's more pleasing. And they have very long lifetimes to live it out. It is said that those beings on the higher planet, when they have, in their sober moments, right, in their sober moments, when they're not lost in the enjoyment that's there, they think, I would be more fortunate if I were on the Earth. Because the Earth is just that perfect blend where it has its pleasures, but also has its pain. And it's just the right atmosphere for one to become a bit thoughtful about life. I could pursue happiness in this world, but I see that the happiness ultimately leads to pain. Maybe there's something more. Maybe I should be focused on something beyond this. And that's where you open up to what's beyond even the planets of the aliens. Right? The aliens that are way out there in the spiritual realm, which is actually our home. Because our home is not in the earthly plane, the lower plane, or the upper planes of the material realm. But it's actually in the spiritual realm. We're made of spirit, and we're moving around in bodies that are made of matter. It's very unnatural. Now, the higher planets, these aliens have very subtle bodies. They have bodies without a lot of the problems that our bodies have. But even those bodies die. And even they know that as much as they're enjoying a very long life, they know that the clock is ticking. And eventually they come back down. And that creates a subtle anxiety that never quite goes away. So we're meant to aim higher than the higher planets. We're meant to aim for the spiritual realm. Right? All Bhagavad Gita is telling us like this. Abrahma bhuvana loka purna arvitanojuna mamupetya tu kaunteya punar janma navijite. That even if you, from the highest planet in the material realm down to the lowest planet in the material realm, all are places wherein birth and death take place. That's unnatural. We're eternal. To be in a body that's born and then dies is very unnatural for us. And we can see how much stress and anxiety and pain it causes us. So he's saying, whether we go up because of our good karma or down because of our bad karma, we shouldn't be so interested in accruing good or bad karma. We should understand that I am spirit. I have an existence beyond this. Let me aim for that. Let me aim for that, what's beyond. And Krishna says, how do you do that? Sarva dharma prityaja. All the different dharmas that are there that might take you to the higher planets or something like that, let them all go. Mam ekam sharanam vraja. Just surrender to me. And I could take you beyond it all. Beyond birth and death. That's the aim of the wise people. The people that are understanding the message. People will take those same texts, and if they're full of desires, it begins to color how you read those texts or what you hear in them. If you're full of material, have you ever noticed that one's desires can block their ability to understand things? Right? Yeah. So it's like that. Two people could be reading the same text and getting very different messages from them. Yeah. But if we try to see them with a pure heart and a pure mind, if we try to take our material desires and just set them aside for a bit, when you read these books, when you pick up a Bhagavad Gita, you can take a moment, take a few deep breaths, and then say a prayer within. You know, dear Lord, let me hear this without the filter of my material desires. Let me set my material desires aside, and at least for some moments, at least for 20 minutes, at least for half an hour, let me take even my whole material identity and set it aside. I'm not a man, I'm not a woman, I'm not black, I'm white, I'm not American, I'm not Indian, I'm not any of these things. I'm a spark of spirit. Let me hear this without any material filter. Let the message penetrate. Let it penetrate through the layers of my conditioning, right, and purify it all. You know, if we can spend some moments like that every day, moments where we step out of our material identity and enter into the timeless realm, right? When I sit down to chant and meditate, right? When I sit down to read this text, if I do some daily puja, as I do my puja, right? As I go into the kirtan, right? For a little while, I have responsibilities in this world, okay.
Yeah.
I'm not going to walk away from them today, that's all right. But at least for this period of the day, let me take my material identity and set it aside, and let me operate on the spiritual platform entirely. If we can live some moments like that every day, we will begin to get a taste for that timeless spiritual existence, right? And we'll begin to be able to operate in that consciousness even as we carry out our worldly responsibilities. But we need to practice it. We need to. There's a yogic practice called Bhuta Shuddhi. Have you heard this before? Bhuta Shuddhi. And it's commonly done like by priests in temples before they do their rituals, before they do their seva or their puja. Different priests will do it in different ways. Some do it very elaborately. Some do it very simply. But the idea is I want to take my material identity and set it aside. Sometimes they're doing pranayama. Have you ever seen a priest doing pranayama before he does puja? He's trying to settle the mind and let go of the material identity. Then he's going to step into the timeless realm and do the puja. So we can try to do that too. When we read the Shastra, when we do our puja, when we enter kirtan, when we do our meditation, we take that material identity, we set it aside, live in that timeless zone. You know, live in that timeless zone. If we don't experiment with that, we're just not creative. We're just not being adventurous. You know, what lies beyond this world? You know, my life, you know, it has its ups and it has its downs, but it's somewhat mundane. You know, these texts are telling us there's so much more. Let's experiment with it. Sri Chaitanya, great, you know, our great avatar for this yuga, he had one prayer, and this prayer is used by some priests as a very simple way of practicing Bhuta Shuddhi. But it's something that we can meditate on every day. And it was just one prayer, one verse. But in that verse, he prays, I am not a Brahmana, a Kshatriya, a Vaishya, or Shudra. I'm not a Brahmachari, a Grihastha, a Vanaprastha, a Sannyasi. I'm all the material designations in all the different categories. That's not me. I might have to play that role externally, but it's not who I am. Who am I? Gopi Bhartor Kamalayor Dasa Dasa Anudasa. I am the servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna, the lover of the gopis of Vrindavan. That's who I really am. Right? That's who I really am. That is my eternal identity. I have an identity that's beyond all of this ups and downs and all the mundane things in my life. Let me experiment with that consciousness. You know, let me experiment with that consciousness every day, at least to some extent. And that'll give me some real spiritual experience. You know, that'll carry me a long way. That'll carry me even beyond the higher planets, into the realm of divine love, into the spiritual realm. Okay. Thank you. Good questions. Good questions. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
You said your true identity is that you're a servant of Lord Krishna.
Yes.
But my question is that some people have a different relationship with, like, they try to have a different relationship with Krishna or God. They think of God as a friend.
Yes.
They think of God as a guide.
Okay.
So, should we think of ourselves as servants, or should we think of ourselves as, people that can be friends with the Lord?
My friend, you're asking a very esoteric question, but it's a good one. But the fact is, the way that we use that term servant, we can use it in two ways. So one is that anybody that's bringing pleasure to Krishna is serving his pleasure, right? And Krishna is reciprocating through his love, serving their pleasure. But in that sense, Krishna's friends are his servants. You see, service is the one element that goes through friendship, that goes through parental love, that goes through romantic love. There's an element of service because there's an element of giving pleasure. There's an analysis of this. That just like there's earth, water, air, ether, like that. What is it? Earth, water, fire, air, ether. So in ether, there's the element of sound. And then if you go to air, there's sound in the sense of touch. And then if you go to fire, there's sound, the sense of touch, but there's also the sense of sight. And if you go to water, there's sound, touch, sight, and taste. And then if you go to earth, there's all the previous ones as well as aroma, smell. And so in a similar way that like one possesses all of them and they expand, they speak the same way about divine love expanding from servitorship, because sometimes you love someone as their servant. You love someone, and within that love, there's always the idea that my respect goes up to them. My love for them is shown through my respect, and their love is shown through their kindness or compassion to me. Like, have any of you ever had a teacher in your life that you really love? Anybody? Okay. And the relationship with those teachers, you always feel they're your superior. And it feels good. It's not like there's any, it's not like there's some feeling like, why are they the teacher and not me, you know? No. It's the nature of that love is you're always sending the respect up, and they're always sending the compassion down. It's a beautiful relationship. A beautiful relationship. It's a beautiful type of love. So within that, there's service. And then with friendship, you actually don't think that Krishna is superior to me. You think we're friends, we're equals. You have to think that way, right? So in there's service, but there's also a sense of equality. And then when you go to the love, a parental love, it said that within Krishna's village, which is an unlimited spiritual realm, all the elders have parental love for Krishna. They love him deeply with the kind of love that a parent has. And so that love has the service, has not only the feeling of equality, but even a feeling of superiority, like Krishna needs me, right? He needs my care. That's the flavor of that love. A parent always has that feeling. Now we have a parent here. We have one parent. Does the parent always feel they need me? My relationship is to help them, to provide for them in some way. So that's another variety of love. So that's got all three. And then when you get to romantic love, it has all of those, but it's got a sweetness and an intensity that the others don't have in romantic love. So that's like the earth, water, fire, air, and ether. So my point is this. In one sense, they're all services running through them all. But in another sense, one of them has the conception that I am the servant. All the others have forgotten that. They just love without feeling this person is superior to me. And really, the love, the most intimate love, that kind of most intimate love where you forget that God is God. In our lineage of bhakti, it's actually that love that we aim for. And it's that love that Sri Chaitanya came to give. And it's that love, especially in the kirtan, that we cultivate. This intimate love. Love of a friend. The love of a friend, where you forget Krishna's friends wrestle with him, and sometimes they beat him. And then they say, now you have to carry me on your shoulders. Right? The ancient texts write about it. And Krishna loves that his friend would beat him sometimes, and that he has to carry his friends on his shoulders, because there's a flavor in that. There's a taste in that, and he wants to taste that. Because as we said before, Krishna's only interest, it's not judging, it's not creation, destruction, any of those kind of things. It's only adventures of love. And in the form of Krishna, he expands in other avatars, and those other avatars are also interested in love. But in the form of Krishna, he can reciprocate with every variety of love, unlimitedly. Okay. Very unique, very special, original, where it all comes from, right there. Thank you. Time? Okay, lots of time left. Any more questions? Yes, your name is?
Jen.
Say again?
Jen.
Jen? Jen. Hello, Jen.
Yeah.
Where are you from, Jen?
I'm from Italy.
From where?
Italy.
Italy. Where in Italy?
Near Rimini,
Okay.
Bologna.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. 1.5 hours. So yeah, I was sitting. I've been a bit nervous because I'm new sick.
Okay.
I was in the kirtan like just before coming here, and whilst I was singing Hare Krishna and the Maha Mantra, I was looking at the picture of Krishna on the right side.
With Radha, the big.
Yeah. Picture with Radha. And my question, I guess, is like how to grow devotion. Yeah, I make it simple and complicated maybe, but I guess that's my biggest question that I'm sitting with right now.
Magnifico question. It's a perfect question. How do we grow our devotion? Bhakti yoga is it has its external beauty. You walk in there and everybody's singing and dancing, and that's wonderful and that's sweet and that's beautiful. But we should never mistake it as just being a sentimental practice. It's a very serious yoga practice, and it's a science. It's a science. It's the science of uncovering the true nature that exists within us, that is temporarily covered or we're out of touch with, that is kind of, we feel removed from because of programming within our mind. So if that programming within the mind can be addressed, then the true nature of divine love that's within us can arise. So this is the fundamental idea behind bhakti, is that our nature is not only eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss, Satchit Ananda, that's there, but when we understand Ananda, bliss, the real bliss, the truest bliss, the deepest bliss, is always expressed through love. And the most perfect love is divine love. Love directed towards the root of all existence, whom we emanate from, and by connecting to that source, we develop love for every living being there is. That's the perfect love. It's not a limited love. It's not a favoritism type of love. It's an all-expanding, perfect, divine love. So that's within us, but somehow we lost touch with that. Now, can you do me a favor? My hat is in my bag there. Not far from here. I was thinking, just as I was coming here this evening, I think we're also fortunate because right here, right where we are, thank you, for thousands of years ago, many thousands of years ago, people were coming right to this spot to ask these kind of questions and get these kinds of answers. It's been going on for, centuries and centuries and centuries. And about 5,000 years ago, one person named Vidura came to Haridwar. Have you been to Haridwar? Okay, but maybe before you leave here, you should try to visit. Very, very important holy place on the bank of the Ganges, Ganga, just like here. And so Vidura met a sage there named Maitreya, and he had a question. He said, when we read these ancient texts, the Vedic literature, it tells us that our nature is blissful. And it also tells us that because we're made of spirit, our nature is changeless. So if we're blissful by nature, and if we are changeless, then why are we not always feeling that bliss? Why do we lose that bliss? How do we lose it? And Maitreya had a very interesting answer for him. You ready for it? He said, he gave, a lot of times these sages, they were forest dwellers, and they would use a lot of nature analogies. And so he used a nature analogy. You have to picture this in your mind. He said the moon is up in the sky at nighttime. You can picture a full moon. And he said, when we look at the full moon, it's steady. It's shining its rays. It's not flickering like sometimes we see like a flame is flickering. The moon isn't flickering, it's steady. But if we look at the reflection of the moon on the river, right, and the river is rippling, so if you look at the reflection of the moon on the river, it looks like the moon is rippling. And if you think that that's the moon, then it seems to you like the moon has the qualities of the river, which is changing. So he was saying in the same way, we are spirit, the self, the soul is spirit, it's steady. But if we look at the reflection of the self on the mind, which is like a river, the mind is made out of matter and it's always moving. So if we look to the mind and think that that's us, then we're looking at a reflection of the self on the always changing mind. We will think that we are like the mind, that we're always moving. And therefore we won't always feel a steady, or the true steady sense of bliss that is our nature, but we'll feel blissful one moment and not so blissful the next, and happy one moment and bored the next, and kind of excited one moment and depressed the next, and secure one moment and in anxiety the next. Okay, so that's the background, that we have this blissful divine love within ourselves, but it seems like we lost it. How did we lose it? It's because of the mind. Because the mind is full of programming through all of our different experiences in life, through what we've seen, through what we've heard, etc. It's programmed our mind to think, in order to be blissful, I need this, and I need that, and I need that, and I need to avoid this, and I can't have any of that. So we spend our time chasing certain things and running away from certain things in this world. And it's also told us our minds are programmed to think, I am something that I'm not. I'm a man. I'm a woman. I'm American. I'm Italian. All these things, none of them are true. Well, only for a moment are you Italian, and only for a moment am I American, and then we leave this body and it's gone forever. You know? So we've got a complicated mind. We need to get this thing under control. We need to get it reprogrammed so that it's harmonious with the nature of the self, which is this blissful divine love. How do we do that? This gets to your question, right? So the sages that have been experimenting with the mind and experimenting with spirituality have said that there are powerful spiritual content out there. And when your mind comes into contact with that content, it transforms your mind into spiritual. It reprograms it. It's like if our mind is a computer with a lot of problematic files on it, it's like an antivirus program that all of your thoughts are going through so that they're no longer problematic, so that they're harmonious with your nature. And so those powerful spiritual contents, they list 5 as being most powerful. There's many, but they list 5 as being most powerful. Would you like to hear what they are? 1 is the holy names of God. These mantras, if you meditate on them, they can transform your mind. 2 is reading these sacred texts, the messages in them, hearing them from, particularly if we hear from them from people that have deep realizations on them, it can very powerfully transform our awareness. 3 is holy places. Rishikesh is like that, but it's hard to find. Right here, it's really going strong, you know? But a lot of times we're just out in some cafe and it's noisy and there's honking and there's people that want to go out and they got the discotheque or they got the bungee jumping. It's covered a lot here. But there are many holy places and some very powerful holy places that when you go there, the spiritual energy is very, it's very profound. So there's the holy names, there's the sacred texts, there's the holy places, there's the ritual of temple worship or deity worship. If you know really what it's all about, not everybody's tuned into it. Even the priests in the temple are not always tuned into it. But if you're really tuned into it, you understand what's going on. It's a very powerful way. Day by day by day, each day, you bring your mind to a very deeply spiritual place, into very deeply spiritual energy, and it begins to recondition your mind into such a way where you begin to see happiness and beauty in offering love and offering service. Very, very powerful. And then the final one was the association of deeply spiritual people. Okay? People with bhakti in their heart is the very powerful way to get it in your own. So these 5 ways, if you bring your mind into contact with them, there will be quick and powerful and effective transformation. But sometimes it seems like, well, I'm doing it, but the effect is not so quick. It seems like something's blocking the flow. So then they go and they give further advice. And it's just like an electric flow, like you plug a lamp into a wall. If your wire is proper, then the energy is just going to flow and boom, you get the light. Right? But sometimes there are things that block the flow of that energy. Right? And what blocks the flow of the spiritual energy, or where we need to be concerned, we need to be concerned that we have favorable concepts. We need to be concerned that we have favorable sentiments, and we need to be concerned that we have a favorable lifestyle. And if all of these are favorable, then it flows, and it flows powerfully. And if any of these are unfavorable, then it's going to create some blockage of that flow. I'm sorry? Favorable means helpful. Helpful. Like, for instance, let's just start with maybe the simplest one, lifestyle. Right? In order to absorb my mind deeply in spiritual content, it is favorable to rise early in the morning. Right? Because later in the day it's more difficult. The mode of passion, the Rajaguna sets in, and it becomes more difficult to concentrate deeply. It's commonly true and generally true, and the sages in their texts have expressed this. So we hear from people that are deeply experienced. I'm not saying that it's impossible in other circumstances, but I'm saying it's favorable. It's going to be helpful. In general, it's going to be helpful. It'll be favorable that we have a healthy diet, that we digest. It'll be favorable that we don't eat too much or don't eat too little. It'll be favorable if we don't sleep too much or sleep too little. Like this. You read any of the text on yoga, they're going to give you instructions on this, how to create a lifestyle that's going to be favorable. So helpful lifestyle and favorable lifestyle. Lifestyle that's not going to interfere, make it more difficult. We're trying to do something that's challenging. We shouldn't be doing things that are making it more difficult. Right? Similarly, there are sentiments that are important. That we understand what's sacred and we relate to it as it is sacred. Because if not, we kind of harden the heart. And bhakti is all about softening the heart. Right? Getting a very soft heart so that we can experience deep spiritual sentiments. So therefore, even simple things like, say we have a sacred book like the Bhagavad Gita. The yogis, they don't put it on the ground. Right? In the West, we don't think about that. We put it here, put it there. Here, they don't do that. They always put it up. Right? If they see it on a shelf and it's upside down, they can't tolerate it. That's the sentiment in their hearts. No, put it right side up. You know? When we relate to other people, this becomes really important. There's a whole science to how to cultivate sentiment and how we relate to other people. How yogis relate to yogis in different categories. If there's a yogi that's on a similar kind of a peer, kind of like a yogi peer, then we try to develop deep, intimate friendship with that person. If there's a yogi that's more experienced and advanced and deeper in this than us, then we show real respect to that person. We try to serve them and hear from them. If there's a yogi that's less experienced than us, we try to help them. If there's people that aren't interested in, even antagonistic to this, then we respect a bit from a distance. Because we want to protect those sentiments in our heart. We want to see every living being as being sacred. This is a big part of yoga. The sentiment that I see God in the heart of every living being, namaste, right? Like that. That's real important. How we walk into a temple. I'm in a sacred space now. How I behave in that temple. How I bow down. I might say a prayer when I walk in. Different things. I want to see it as sacred. All of these are going to be favorable for developing the kind of heart wherein that original divine love in the heart arises. Okay. So there's lifestyle, there's sentiment, and conceptions. One needs the favorable conceptions. And perhaps the most fundamental is that if I want to develop a relationship of love with God, and again, through God with every living being, then I need to understand I'm not God. In one sense, I'm the energy of God, but in another sense, I'm dependent on God. Nityo nityanam, chaitanas chaitananam, eko bahunam, yo vidadati kaman. This is Upanishads. That amongst the many living beings, there's one living being. Amongst the many conscious beings, there's one conscious being. Amongst the many eternal beings, there's one eternal being. Amongst the many conscious beings, there's one conscious being. The many are dependent on the one. They're saying it's just like the sun and the sunshine. The sunshine, is the sunshine the sun? Kind of both, right? Yeah. Yes, it's the sun. If I say open up the curtains and let the sun in, the warmth of the sun, the light of the sun is coming in, but it's not exactly that the sun came in. But in one sense, the sun did come in. So the sunlight emanates from the sun. The sun doesn't emanate from the sunlight. There's a source, and then there's that's dependent on the source. It has the same qualities of the source, heat and light. And in that way, it's one with the source. It's made of the same energy as the source. It is the energy of the source. In the same way, we're the energy of God. And we have the same qualities of God, eternal, full of knowledge, full of bliss. But we're very small, and so we're dependent on that. We have our source. If I think I am that source, in all sense, then I can never develop that love. Because love has the object and the subject. Right? So in this way, conceptions, sentiments, lifestyle, if they're suitable, then we bring our mind to the mantras, to the names of God. If we bring our minds to the form of God in the temple, Gauranga Prabhu, my obeisances. If we bring our minds to the great devotees, absorbent in them, if we bring them to these literatures, etc., and we do it with favorable conceptions, favorable lifestyle, favorable concepts, it will be powerful. And in a relatively short amount of time, that divine love will arise. The devotion that you're looking for, it'll come. It'll start to arise. You'll be blessed that way. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. It's inside you. It just needs to come out. Okay? Another question? Oh, we repeat the 5.
The 5 for the mantra, the sacred text.
There's a way to remember. We say Nam, which means name. Dham, which means holy place. Nam, Dham. Then Bhagavatam, which refers to the sacred texts. Especially the Srimad Bhagavatam for bhakti. Very important. This is the text you want to read and study every day. This podcast that I do with my friends, we read from Bhagavatam every day. So Nam Dham Bhagavatam, then the deity, the temple worship, and the association of the devotees. These 5. It's called Panch Anga Bhakti, 5 limbs of bhakti. And perhaps the most powerful is this kirtan. You get absorbed in this kirtan. Get absorbed in it. You chant this name, but you chant it not just from the mouth. You chant it from the heart. And from the heart, what you're saying is, dear Lord Krishna, dear Radha, please accept my service. Please accept me as your servant. I've tried everything in this world for many, many lifetimes. I've tried to be the center. I've tried to be powerful. I've tried to be famous. I've tried to be beautiful. I've tried to do all these different things. And ultimately, it leads to suffering. And now I've decided that I don't want that anymore. Now I've decided I want to serve you with love. Please accept me. This is how the gopis prayed to Krishna just before the Rasa Leela. They pray like this. He said to them, why have you come out at night? You know Rasa Leela? You're familiar? It's something like that painting, but they're dancing. Right? You've seen Krishna, many Krishnas dancing with many gopis. Have you seen? This is the culmination of all of the Vedic text, is this moment. Krishna plays his flute. All the gopis come out to meet him. And Krishna says, why are you girls coming out in the middle of the night to see a boy? This isn't a good idea. You should all go back. Go back to your homes. Go back to your family. Go back to your dharmic lifestyle. And they're saying, we've tried all the dharmas over many, many lifetimes. We've tried to be happy without you. In a sense, this is what they're expressing to him. Now, all we want is to serve you with love. Please accept us. When you chant, you can pray like that. Open up your heart like that, and then just chant the name and hear the name and dance. And it'll be very powerful and effective. Especially when it's people that have devotion for Krishna in their heart. Real. Not fakers. People that really have it. It's powerful. Time? One more short question. Yes?
I don't know if it's short, but
Okay.
make it short. So I've heard you talk about truth,
Okay.
and I'm wondering what you perceive are the markers of truth. Like how, yeah, you can rephrase that, but it's like truth is important, but
Yeah.
how do we beyond truth?
Okay. The fundamental way that the yogi answers that question, the Vedantin answers that question, is that there's one source of truth that everything can be measured by, and that's the Vedic texts. Then sometimes they'll say also another way to do it is Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. There's the texts, there's the Guru, the person that you feel knows the text and embodies the text, and the Sadhus, the people that live according to the texts. And so there's that. And that's a kind of like an orthodox way for me to answer that question. Sometimes you maybe read something in the text and it doesn't feel right, or doesn't feel like it's the truth, right? So then you could take that to the Guru or take that to the Sadhu and try to see if they can help you understand it in a way where it rings true. So it's not that we throw away our own reasoning. As a matter of fact, it's important if we hear anything from the text that doesn't ring true, that we try to get to the bottom of it, that we examine it, that we question it. We can question not in a mood of challenge, but in a mood of wanting to understand. That mood becomes important. Tadvati pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnanimes tattvadarshana. The tattvadarshani, those that have seen the truth, they can share it with us. But the way to receive it is described in that verse, text 434 of Bhagavad Gita. Just try to learn the truth by approaching the Tattvadarshis, those that know it. Inquire from them submissively, right? And render service to them. Right? In this way, they can share that truth to you because they have seen it like that. But that's the mood. So the truth can be found there. If it doesn't feel like truth, then search it out. Inquire and see if it can become clear. And when you meet the person that can make it clear for you, that person will be a great help in your life. Thank you very much. I think now we can all take part in the absolutely wonderful, spiritual, transcendental, powerfully effective, dynamic spiritual food, prasadam, as well as the incredibly spiritually dynamic, powerfully effective kirtan, or music. I so much have enjoyed spending this evening with you. Tomorrow, we get into some exciting stuff. 9 a.m. here, I've been teaching an ongoing course from 9 for about an hour. We're getting deep into Vyasa's texts, what they mean, and the confidential aspect of Vedanta, the divine love aspect. Please, if you're free, please, we'd be happy to see you there. Thank you all so much. Hari Om Tat Sat.